Hi guys, and welcome to another video on my channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking about US F1 visa interview for African students specifically. If you've not seen any of my previous videos, I make videos about my experience as an international student in the United States. The goal being that sharing my experience should help inform other people about how to navigate the process of being an international student in a foreign country, thousands and thousands of miles away from home. And I realized that it's been a while since I made a video about visa, and some of the content that I have out there, it's almost 2 years old now. So what I did was reach out to some people that just came here on F1 students and asked them some couple of questions about F1 visa interview, how their interview went, the questions they were asked, and just to have an idea of what has changed since the last time that I appeared for the visa interview. The idea being that if I share this information with you, it might help you in doing well on your visa interview. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. If you've not seen the previous video that I made, you should go back on the channel. I'm going to link it somewhere here or here somewhere, and you should go back and check that video because it's filled with very valuable information. This video is not replacing that, but rather adding more context based on how things have changed in recent times. So I'm going to be talking based on the point that I've highlighted here, based on my conversation with them, and hopefully you will learn one or two things from that. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is the idea is still very much the same. Whenever you appear for a visa interview, it's on you as the applicant to convince the visa officer that you're a genuine student. And doing that can come in various ways. It can come from you showing up with a fully funded program, which means the school really wants you. They're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on you to show up, or that might be answered with you responding to questions in such a way that it shows that you have ties back to your country here, your country in Nigeria or Kenya or Ghana or wherever you're watching from, or it might also show in how much of effort you've put into getting an admission. Think of pacing your GRE, think of doing well in school, etc., having a really high GPA, getting to a very prestigious school. So those are like the things that you want to think about when it comes to showing up for a visa interview. But I'm going to start from talking about the things that you should do before you even show up for visa interview. And two of the most important things in that area is, number one, filling out your DS-160 form. Now, a lot of people, or some people, would hire somebody else to fill out their DS-160 form. Why this sounds convenient and easy, because you don't have to lift a finger, you can just get somebody to fill out the details for you. It might pose a problem to you when you appear for your visa interview. Say the person that filled out your form supplied some information that you are not very conversant with, and then the visa officer is seeing this form, which is supposedly a representation of you, of your profile, and they're asking you questions from this DS-160 and you cannot provide adequate or correct response. That's a huge red flag. So my advice to people is fill out the form yourself so that you know every single details on the form in and out, and that's going to save you a lot of headache down the line. The second important form is your Form I-120. Now, your Form I-120 is the sort of form that you get from the school that gave you the offer of admission. Usually it contains the name of the school, the course you're applying for, it contains the cost of attendance, which is usually the tuition, boarding, and fee. If you were awarded any form of scholarship, it's going to show up on this form. It's also going to show who is sponsoring your program. Now, this is another very important part that I did not mention in my previous video, which is if a family member is sponsoring you and they have their name on your Form I-120, when you show up for your visa interview, it is not advisable for you to show up with a different sponsor, with a sponsor that is different from the person that you listed on your Form I-120. If you got a graduate assistantship, ensure that that graduate assistantship shows up on your Form I-120, that you're getting some part of your tuition or all of your tuition waived. Make sure that the sponsor that shows up on your I-120 form is the same sponsor that you're going to show up with their statement of account at the embassy when you appear for your visa interview. So those are the things that I really wanted to touch upon as far as the pre-interview phase is concerned. Now, moving on to the meat of the video itself, which is how to give a successful interview. Basically, the first thing that I like to lay emphasis on is confidence. Think about it this way. Imagine you have, say, like $10,000 in your bank account, and then you went to a restaurant and you wanted to pay for your food, the confidence that you have, if let's say your food is just like $50 or so, you're not worried about your card being declined because you know you have $10,000 in your bank account, right? Even if the waiter should come back and say, oh, this card did not go through, you will tell them confidently to go do it again because you know you have money in the bank account. Now, visa application or visa approval is a privilege, it's not a right. But I painted an example so that you'll be able to imagine the type of confidence that I need you to have when you show up for your visa interview. Because it's going to go a long way, because these visa officers are trained to read your body language, to pay attention to things that you don't even say with your mouth, and they have a very short window or a very short period of time to assess you because there are other people waiting behind you, right? So you want to be very, very confident. When you answer questions, project your voice. When you say things, make sure that number one, they're factual, make sure that you're saying it with a very deep understanding of what you're saying. And those are like the key things to keep in mind. Now, the next question that I get very often is, how do you get to that level of confidence? Which is understandable. You've never applied for a visa like this, an interview like this before, and you're seeing like several people ahead of you getting denied. It's very, very much understandable to be worried about having self-confidence. But the key thing to keep in mind is that practice helps you to get to a point where you're close to being perfect. What this means is that before you apply for your visa interview, write down a list of possible questions. I'm going to touch on those questions before the end of this video. Write down a list of possible questions that they might ask you during the visa interview, and do your very possible best to practice the response to this question with your friends or your cousin or anybody that is close to you. Have them play the fake visa officer and provide a response that you have in mind to them. Now, what this does for you is that it helps you craft a story around your application, right? Because when you said this thing over and over again, say like 5, 10, 15 times, you don't need to think really hard when you're responding during the visa interview before you can provide a very good response, right? So that's a very important aspect of the whole process. Practice, practice, practice until you're able to be fluent and you're confident enough to provide answer to these possible questions. Now, there's also concern about people showing up with cramped responses. This has always been an issue, even when I showed up for visa interview or while I was preparing for my visa interview years ago. The issue has always been people show up and then they get thrown off because the visa officer did not ask them the question that they've cramped the response to, and that becomes an issue. Now, the way to avoid that is this. If I ask you, what's your name? You know your name. That's a fact. But you don't have to start with, my name is XYZ. You can start with, XYZ is my name. However you start, you're always going to end up providing XYZ as the final answer. Now, why that is important is this. If you know where you're going to, you can start your response from anywhere, as long as you don't lose sight of what your final answer is going to be. And that's the key to practicing and ensuring that you nail your answer down. So when you're crafting response to those possible questions, don't memorize your response word for word. What you should do is have a final answer in mind, and you can open your mouth, whatever it starts from, but just make sure before you end talking, you get to that final piece of information that you've been asked to provide. And that will help you because even if you didn't start well, you're going to remember, like after like first 2 or 3 sentences, you're going to remember that, oh, this is the final answer that I have in mind for this particular question. And you're going to find your way back to that final answer. And this comes with practicing, okay? Spend time practicing, spend time thinking about possible questions, spend time saying it out loud. Don't just be like, oh, I have it in my head. Say it out loud to people around you. And that's going to be very, very helpful for you on the day of your interview. And very last but not the least is to understand the fact that American visa officer can smell if you're desperate from afar, which means like you don't want to show up as a desperate applicant because that's gonna sway things away from you. You want to show up knowing that you do have options, which is true. America is not the only country in the world, which is true. Show up knowing that you have option, either the visa is approved or not, your life still continues. Hopefully it gets approved, but show up with that mentality that it's not the end of the world if the visa is not approved, right? that would really help your confidence. And in wrapping up, some of the things that I said I'm going to talk about as regards to possible questions are like, they ask you why the USA? Why are you going to the US to get your degree? It might be undergrad, it might be graduate degree. Why the United States? And because you can really get the degree anywhere. Why? More often than not, you want to talk about the program, how you're interested in a particular program, or how you're interested in a particular research that the professor is doing, how the program is ranked above all other program, blah blah blah. This is just you doing your research to this question. And then they ask you why now. And this is a very common question based on my recent conversation, especially if you've been working for a while or if you've been out of school for a while. They'll ask you why did you all of a sudden decide to go back to school? And they'll ask you questions about who is paying for this degree and what would this degree do for you, like how would this degree benefit you. These questions are important because it's basically there to judge your intention as a student. It's also there to judge your intention after school, right? When they ask you what would this degree do for you, you want to talk about how the degree is going to help you when you get back to your country, how you see yourself contributing to the field, things like that. And last but not the least, when they ask you who is sponsoring, make sure that you have like a detailed information about who is sponsoring your education, why they're spending thousands and thousands of dollars for you to get the degree. And that's all I have for you in this video. I hope it has been helpful, and hopefully you would be able to go through the visa interview process without much stress. And you can drop a comment, or you should drop a comment. If you have any question or something that you would want me to cover on, you should drop a comment and I will be happy to provide a response video to that. But that's it. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.